All right, well, it's almost 2 after now, so I'll go ahead and get started. As you probably know, I'm Kristen Purvis, one of the instructional designers here in the Office of Online Learning at UNC Pembroke. Today we're going to be talking about designing for optimal course navigation, and this is for online courses. You might be able to use some similar concepts if you're teaching in person, but this one is geared specifically towards online classes. And the information I got for it is from this magazine, Talent Development Magazine. And this is the October issue from last year. These are free if you want to sign up online. They have digital copies as well as print. I prefer print because so much stuff is digital nowadays. It's good to take a screen break. But this is the article it's from. Make it easier for your online students, online learners. And you can see they've got a needle in a haystack. So that's a good graphic to represent what we're trying to avoid with the optimal course navigation, is to make navigation and things easier. So I've got a link to that at the end of this presentation as well, if you're interested in getting that magazine subscription. So let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so the goal for today is to enhance the user experience so that learners aren't laboring to find and use instructional materials. For the overview, what we're going to be looking at overall today is shifting to a user experience, which is sometimes abbreviated as UX. So shifting to a user experience lens, and by doing that, we separate the audience experience into 3 episodes, which are access, navigation, and use. So a couple examples of shifting viewpoints in the past when technology was emerging. In the early days of television and networked computing, people would adapt radio programs to be on TV. They would move face-to-face classes online, and both of those required tailored approaches. So for radio programs, they'd use sound effects and a lot of narration and different voices to kind of differentiate between the different characters. But once television came around, they had to rework the whole program to adapt it to TV. It wasn't just a matter of taking the exact same radio program and putting it on TV. They had to make some significant changes. And it's the same way when you're moving a face-to-face class to online. It can still have the same kind of narrative, but there will be specific things that you'll need to adapt so that it's optimized for online. And with everything that's been going on the past 2 years, a lot of people have kind of been thrown into the world of online learning. And so even though it was a difficult transition for a lot of people, one of the positive things that's come out of it is that a lot of instructors are now adept at using online learning tools, and we can further hone those skills that have been picked up recently by adopting that user experience lens. So as I mentioned earlier, the online audience experience has 3 distinct phases: how they access the training materials, how they navigate to the specific training resource that they're looking for, and what their experience is as they begin to work through and use the resource. And you'll notice throughout this presentation that I've color-coded each of these words: access, navigate, and use. Sometimes this is navigation instead of navigate, but they're color-coded and they've each got their own shapes, and that's something that I use to exemplify one of the concepts we're going to talk about with navigation. So for access, the definition of that is steps that learners must take to locate the learning materials, such as the online course itself, webinars such as this one, which I'm recording. So if someone wanted to access this later, how are they going to find it? Lesson videos, interactive sites, documents, or a combination of any of those or other things. So why it matters is because if learners can't access the course materials for the class, it doesn't matter how great those materials are if the student can't find them, because they won't even know that they exist. So what effective access looks like is a single landing page within Canvas, And an easy way to do this is just to use your homepage that's already built in, and they can navigate to modules from there. And you can further subdivide those materials into videos, reading materials, things like that. So I'm just going to show you an example of how we've been using that in the COTE course that we teach through the Office of Online Learning. We just spent the past year revamping all this, so it's looking really good now, in my opinion. But so this is the home page. This is the landing slash homepage that people see when they first click onto the course. And it's just got a very short overview, welcome to the class. And then Terry created these icons, which is a really cool idea to help further differentiate each of the modules and kind of give a little visual overview of what that module is about. So for theory, we've got a magnifying glass. You can see all these other ones that are just kind of like a good way for the student to get a visual representation of what the module is going to be talking about. And these recur throughout the module. So if we click on week 1 overview, there's that magnifying glass again. So it helps them divide it up and know exactly what they're looking at just at a glance. And it's a fun way to add some personality to the class too. Let me see. And I also wanted to show you our naming scheme. So for assignments, I chose to indent them by 1 space, and you just do that by increasing indent. By default, they're all indented to this level. And to differentiate the assignments, I just indented them 1 spot over. And I prefaced each of the assignments with assignment : and then the name of the assignment. So they realize that these are all materials because they're not indented. They don't have this assignment precursor. And that is consistent throughout the course. And for videos, I like to put that in front of those as well, just so they know that they're going to need to use audio for that particular material. Sometimes students like to go to Starbucks to study or somewhere else where they need either headphones or a quiet environment. So I like to just put video or what kind of material it is if it's something that's different than the usual article or text-based something. And for each week, you can see we always do week 4 overview, week 5 overview. Just keep that consistency going, and that'll really go a long way in helping your students navigate through everything. And then for final project, we just prefaced it with that so they know where to find that. So yeah, just be as detailed and consistent as possible, but also concise. Okay, moving on to the final bullet point for access. Clear and consistent communication of the access point, which would be the home page that we just went over. You can also send automated emails each week with a link to your course homepage, just so they don't have to, if they don't use bookmarks for some reason on their web browser, they can just go to your email each week and that'll take them directly to that week's module and they can work through everything. You can also detail exactly what materials they're going to be accessing that week, just so they can have that visual checklist of, okay, these are all the things I need to do this week. And they can even like print out the email and check it off if they want, just to have that double the email from you. And then it'll also be listed in the module for each material and each assignment. Are there any questions before I move on to navigation? All right. So navigation is the steps that learners must take after they've accessed your lesson to locate the specific resource that they're looking for. So let's say they were on module 1 and they didn't have the resources to watch that video right then. Maybe they were at Starbucks and didn't have their headphones or it was noisy. So they make a mental note to themselves, okay, I've got to go back and watch that video later. You want to make sure that they're able to access that later on easily without having to sort through too much stuff. So that goes hand in hand with what I went over a little bit ago about the consistent naming structure and labeling things accurately and succinctly. So since it says video there, they'll know that that's the video they need to watch. Why it matters: if the learners can't find the resources they're looking for, they won't be able to refer back to the information they need to learn the lesson. And that also goes with maybe they've already done all of the materials for that week. Maybe they've already done the assignments, but they need to go back and review before their final exam. Or there's a specific topic within a module that they were a little bit weak with, and they need to go back and look at that. So just having it clearly labeled where they can easily find it. What effective navigation looks like: context menu, which is also known as a table of contents, use Canvas modules. We just went over all that. And it enables the learners to skim quickly to the category they need. So if they already know, oh, I just needed to review module 3, they can just find that one and they're good to go. They don't have to sort through a whole long list of every single assignment from the whole semester. It'll just be categorized by each module. And then consistent formatting. We went over the naming and specifying assignments, and you can indent those as well. Hierarchies, and that just means like having the modules be their own categories for each one. And then color coding and shapes. That's what I was talking about with this navigation and access, and you'll see on the next slide use. So for navigation, I've constantly been using this diamond shape and red to indicate navigation, and I've consistently been using an oval and blue for access, and then a green rectangle for use. So yes, I love using those visual cues to help with the consistency. And you can do that with the icons in Canvas. Any questions about navigation before I move on to use? Okay. So use is the ease and economy with which learners can interact with and learn from a given resource. And why it matters is that if your students feel comfortable using the materials, they can focus on absorbing the information rather than worrying about where to find things. And that's a pretty common complaint from online students, is that I don't know where to find any of this stuff. I'm so lost. I don't know what's expected of me. So with online classes, especially because there's that added layer of autonomy and independence, which is nice sometimes, it can also add a burden to the student because they're 100% responsible for finding everything they need within that course. So the easier you can make that on them, the more successful they'll be, and the less emails you'll get asking them asking you where to find this or that. So what effective online materials look like. I made this chart here that shows some characteristics that are shared with face-to-face materials and some that are unique to online materials. Let's see. So both will need to be clear, concise, and complete with the text. That goes with the naming structure we were talking about. Images should expand and clarify content and include labels, captions, and callouts. And when teaching in an online class, accessibility is also a really important factor to consider. So if you use images in your class that are just decorative in nature, you can just check that they are decorative on the, I can't remember what it's called right now, but in Word, if you have an image, you can indicate that it's just a decorative image. So if someone in your class uses a screen reader, that screen reader knows to just skip over that image and not bother trying to read it to the user. But if it's an informational image, you'll have to include like a text description of what it is. Like for this, I've got this chart, but it's not an image, it's actually a table. So a screen reader would be able to read all of this text in order. But if it was an image of a table, then that screen reader would not be able to read it. And that would be problematic. So with images, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, but they're a little more complicated in terms of accessibility. So critical terms should be correctly and consistently used. Acronyms should be spelled out during first use, including glossary if necessary. And that's a big one for a lot of science classes. I know there's a lot of acronyms in there. So yeah, the first time, always make sure you spell it out. Even if it's an advanced class, everyone can always use a refresher for remembering what the acronym stands for. Definitions and examples of new terms should be provided. Activities and assessments should mirror authentic tasks. And for online materials specifically, and some of these I feel like they overlap with the face-to-face stuff too, but they probably are a little more pertinent in online classes, but you should explicitly state what learners need to do and in what order. So for your Canvas class, your modules will be in order, and you can even say on the home page or in your syllabus somewhere that they're expected to work through the modules in order. You can give them a time estimate for how long it'll take to complete each task and the deadlines. What I talked about yesterday is that one of the reasons a lot of students choose to take online classes is because of the added flexibility. They might have other obligations outside of class, like childcare, a job, something like that, that adds to their time constraints. And so putting a time estimate for each material, like, okay, it'll take you about 20 minutes to read this article, or it'll take you about 5 minutes to complete this quiz. It helps them gauge how much time they're going to need to set aside for that particular module and that assignment. And it just takes some of the stress off of them as far as that scheduling goes and balancing their other priorities. You can also include communicating with them who to contact with questions and how. Most of you, I'm sure, already do that on your course syllabus, just having your contact information with your office hours and your email address or phone number. Organize and label materials meaningfully. That's what we went over when I was showing you the naming structures and the indentation for assignments. A really nice thing to have is a progress bar. I'm working through an online study guide for a certificate I'm working towards, and they have a progress bar at the top, and it is so satisfying when you see it go up by a percentage point each time. So that's a really nice thing to include if you're able to. And lastly, anticipate areas of confusion and preventively clarify those. So yeah, if there's a particular topic in your class that in the past students have kind of struggled with, or they aren't sure, like if you're using an external tool and they have to register separately for that, I would go ahead and clarify. You will need to set up a separate account to access this material. You'll need this information to do so, or a lot of times they can just log in with their UNCP credentials. Like one of the tools I was talking about yesterday, Flipgrid. Even if you haven't used Flipgrid before, you can still sign in with your UNCP credentials. And yeah, it just makes it simpler. So yeah, just explain all that ahead of time so they know that they're doing the right thing and they're on the right track. And once again, you'll get less emails asking for guidance if you follow those tips. So any questions about use? Nope. Okay. Well, that concludes my presentation. So I'll send you all this survey link. I'll just put that in the chat. And I'll also put the link to that magazine that I got this information from, if anyone wants to sign up for that. And again, that's totally free if you want to get a subscription to Talent Development Magazine. I've got a bunch of these now because I've been getting them since the summer, and they've always got at least 1 or 2 really good articles in there that's relevant to instructional design. So I highly recommend checking them out. Are there any questions in general from today? Nope. All right. righty, I will end the meeting then. Thank you everybody for attending. Good to see some of y'all again for 2 days in a row.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.